Hi, everybody. Welcome back to One Sustainability. We are joined now by Sarah Sterzl. She's the Chief Sustainability Officer for Hensoldt. She's joining us today from Munich. So welcome, Sarah. Sarah's topic today for her talk is security as a foundation for a sustainable future. Sarah, welcome. Welcome to One Sustainability. We look forward to your remarks and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Glenn, for the warm intro and welcome. Good morning or good afternoon from my side as well. And thank you for the opportunity to speak here today. So I'm Sarah Sterzl, originally from the US, Hartford, Connecticut, but currently based in Munich in Germany. And I've been working in the field of sustainability in defense already during my studies, basically ever since. And today I'm responsible for sustainability at the Hensoldt group. Hensoldt is a spin-off from Airbus Defense and Space, which got acquired by KKR, the American investor, in 2017 and went public then in 2020. So since then we are a public company and have expanded tremendously. And now we have facilities all over the world with main production sites in Germany, France, UK, Australia, and a huge site in South Africa. So that is our main activities there. My topic today, it's defense and sustainability. First of all, a contradiction, for a long time excluded by most investors and banks as a exclusionary criteria from ESG investments anyways. Especially in Europe, it has become increasingly difficult to secure our access to financial means. Most banks have clear exclusion criteria, and we even got our bank accounts terminated. A lot of defense companies here in Europe, in particular in Germany. And recent regulations like the EU taxonomy had fostered this development. And however, we can now experience a shift in that perception due to the Ukraine war. So that brings me back to our matter today, sustainability in the defense industry. Is it really a contradiction? So I'll take a closer look and show you what we at Hensoldt do about sustainability, being in the defense sector. So let's look at it separately first, so ESG and defense itself. So first, sustainability. ESG, so we call that environment, social, and government. For us, it's the same term as sustainability. It's always this broad picture, and all these three pillars has been a mega trend. There's hardly any opponents or doubters. People agree that we have to make a difference for our future, for the next generations. But one was not sure, must one not also be able to afford sustainability? And would this trend disappear again in a crisis? Well, so the crisis, or better the string of crises that we had now, COVID, the Ukraine, especially in Europe, has made clear that sustainability is here to stay. Priorities may shift or evolve between the pillars of ESG, but the urgent need for sustainability and also the opportunities that for businesses that ESG implies are unquestioned. I'll take a look at the drivers of sustainability in a moment, but let's take a closer look at the defense industry now. So I think it's a very special situation in Germany in particular, because the perception of society in Germany towards the defense industry was rather a negative attitude until the Ukraine crisis. So until February this year, it had clearly shifted because it became clear that the security we live in cannot be taken for granted. And so the crisis have pushed both in our society or among our stakeholders, the ESG issue, as well as the positive perception of our industry. So ESG will stay, we're sure about that, but will also this positive perception of our industry or this shift be sustainable? And what is the danger if we see ESG and sustainability as a contradiction? And that's what I want to look into more closely now. So let's maybe start with why ESG matters. What are the drivers for sustainability, expectations and developments also from our defense perspective? So let's start with the top left, our investors and analysts. There's new strategies of ESG or green investing that have emerged, making it increasingly difficult to obtain funds for us. Already in defense companies in particular have difficulties, as I mentioned before, obtaining funding. the ESG assets under management are increasing, and even from the majority compared to the total assets under management. So I think ESG ratings and a strong ESG positioning are becoming increasingly important for us to avoid a disqualification in the financial markets. And for many investors, ESG, I would say, is mostly a tick in the box from what we've experienced as a risk management approach. For ESG investors, though, it is quite essential. So the bottom line is what we've experienced, that ESG plays a crucial role in ensuring access to financial means. And we had an ESG roadshow for the first time earlier this year. And we experienced that analysts had very specific questions about ESG, especially about targets in the executive compensation, about the matter of human rights in our industry, of course, and also environmental aspects. The second development I want to look at is the regulatory environment, which is moving extremely quickly, whether it's the Sustainable Finance Plan, the EU taxonomy, the EU Green Deal, the Supply Chain Act, new reporting requirements. The EU has set an extremely high standard that brings opportunities, but also threatens our global competitiveness. And the EU taxonomy, for example, is an insanely complex framework. Not sure if you're familiar with that in the US, but it is one of the most complex framework, I think, in the recent time in the EU. It's divided in a green and a social taxonomy, and the green taxonomy has already been adopted. So we must analyze the percentage of our revenue, CapEx and OpEx that is considered as sustainable, and disclose that. And that will be extended now year for year. And the social taxonomy is very hotly debated, because according to that framework, industries are divided into sustainable, neutral, or socially harmful, which is, of course, a very extreme term. And that was where the defense was originally being considered as socially harmful. Experiences now with the green taxonomy has not been positive overall. So the social taxonomy is currently on hold, but it is still in progress. So we'll see how this debate will move on. In addition to the taxonomy, there's further reporting requirements that are becoming more demanding, both on our own reporting, which has to comply with more and more frameworks, with European frameworks, US or international frameworks, and it's linked to financial reporting more closely. But also our supplier related reporting becomes more important. So we'll really need to collaborate more with our suppliers, our third parties, for this reporting. And so we need to find solution to not only be compliant with all these reporting requirements and regulatory requirements, but use our ESG performance and the efforts we put in there as a competitive advantage. So the third part I want to look at is our employees and also our future workforce. I think you've heard the term or the saying that we're in a war for talent. And while some say that the war is over and the talent has won, the priorities of the younger generation have shifted, and we need to manage this generational shift. And we must also remember that the new generation will not be our future workforce only, but also our future investors and business partners. And last but not least, it's the society and the rethinking in our society, especially here in Germany and the EU. As mentioned earlier, the perception of our industry has changed since the Ukraine situation. And we can take advantage of this positive momentum and further reinforce this with a strong ESG performance, especially for us in the defense industry. So society has clear expectations of the companies and the government towards sustainability. And I think we can leverage that further. So based on these expectations, the experiences that we've made here with our stakeholders, would go more into detail about the capital market and the ESG ratings. So in essence, I'm sure many of you are familiar with that. So a new business segment has been established with these ratings. Rating agencies basically assess the ESG performance and companies and sell their rating to investors. So the evolution has been very fast, and some big players that have merged are now the most influential rating agencies worldwide. You can see them here on the right in the chart. The struggle with these rating agencies is they can be sometimes very frustrating, as not all of them offer the possibility to provide feedback. So you get a rating based on publicly available information, for example, through your sustainability report. And that is valid for 1 year with no opportunity to influence that. For example, if you feel that certain information has not been considered or is not displayed correctly. Only a few agencies allowed to collaborate with them. And another hurdle is for us in the EU that these agencies are almost all based in the US, which is not critical only from data perspective view, but more challenging when our governance model is assessed according to a US methodology that is not applicable to our models. But well, despite the hurdles and frustration, complaining does not help us. We can't get out of that. ESG ratings play a very important role for investors, and they may become even more important as the EU considers a directive to make ESG ratings mandatory part of credit ratings. So we need to address them, and our approach is to achieve 2 to 3 strong ESG ratings per year and focus on a few strong or the biggest rating agencies. In fall 2020, our IPO was coming up. I mentioned that before. And we were confronted with all these expectations that I just showed you. So how did we deal with it? I want to go a little bit in detail how we set up ESG at Hensoldt for our defense and our defense business. So basically in 2020, we completely reorganized sustainability at Hensoldt, or you could also say we built it from scratch. The first and most important step was to create awareness and get the buy-in from the management, whereby we naturally had a very strong driver with the IPO and all this attention from the investors, from the banks, the new regulations that would apply then after the IPO. But nevertheless, I would say the commitment from the management board has to be sincere and really strong in order to establish its sustainability. And not just from the board, but also from senior management and the department heads, because you won't get an ESG strategy implemented successfully if you don't have the support from them. So I dealt with that very intensively in the beginning. And after we have created this governance, which is in our case, a sustainability department as a special unit reporting to the board of directors, and that consists of a cross-functional ESG team. But we also have an ESG committee on executive level. And once we've established that, we started with this materiality analysis. Very special term, I think the ones in ESG are familiar with that. It's an analysis that basically sets the foundation for everything we do in terms of sustainability at our company. So we have thus classified, prioritized, and clustered numerous, like dozens of sustainability related topics and matters. And this resulted then in this matrix. And we always focus on these 7 clusters, how we call them. So it's business integrity, health and safety, human potential, so mostly focusing on people development and training, but also diversity and equality, product responsibility, which really focuses from the product development to the production side, the materials used, for example, conflict minerals, to the use of our products, for example, if we use them not only for military purposes, but also for the conservation of endangered species or protection of the nature, for example. So these kind of matters, we'll have community relations, so societal engagement, responsibility among the supply chain, and last but not least, planet and resources. And so based on this, we have developed our sustainability strategy, which is an integral part of our corporate strategy, which I think is really important. So our corporate strategy is based on various pillars, and one of which is sustainability, which is very crucial. I think that it is really embedded in that corporate strategy. And this is in turn, then one of these pillars is our ESG strategy 2026. So back then we launched that last year. It was a 5-year program, and also based on these 7 clusters. And for each of these topics, we have defined targets, measures, and KPIs together with the departments, but also the countries. And it's indeed a very comprehensive and ambitious strategy plan that we've developed here. But yeah, it covers for us all the important sustainability related topics. And so far we've launched that and implemented that successfully so far from in the first 2 years. Yeah, to be able to implement that, of course, we have identified focus topics because we cannot focus on every sustainability related matter that is out there and see what is the most crucial topic for us, where we have the most impact also externally. And so I brought these 4 projects. The first one is this, really interesting topic, I would say, also very important for myself. It's the human rights program. It's currently a very big topic, I think, especially in defense, and was repeatedly addressed by investors also at our General Assembly. So we must position ourselves how we prevent and manage human rights risks in our business, but also with our business partners and our supply chain. So we launched this program last year. The second topic is diversity and equal opportunities, where we have different building blocks, such as gender diversity or inclusion, as well as internationals or different cultures. And we also have an internal program that we call Elevate. So that is why it is stated here as an example. And that is really to foster a cultural change or a change in our mindset to get rid of these stereotypes and unconscious biases that I think we are all confronted with. And yeah, it begins with our mindset and culture, I think, especially in this topic of diversity. But in the end, it drives our performance. So that is why we set also very specific targets there and work on our diversity targets. The third topic, it's kind of connected with the first one, that is responsibility or matter of human rights in our supply chain. There is a new supply chain law. Right now it's a German law, but the EU law has already been released as well, which deals with the matter of human rights and environmental matters among the supply chain, which is a very comprehensive program as well that we've launched this year. And last but not least, I think that's in everyone's focus today, especially in the EU, is carbon neutrality, where we set the target to become carbon neutral by 2035. This is also aligned with common frameworks like the Science-Based Target Initiative, which is very challenging, I think, for everyone in the company. This is focused on scope 1 and 2, but we're also focusing on the scope 3 emissions, of course. So yeah, now that we've seen what we're doing, why and how, the question is, how do we show it? So among other things, really important for us is the sustainability report that we publish annually. This covers all ESG topics, including our management approach, the programs, the KPIs of all the relevant sustainability topics and out of the strategy. It's very comprehensive, but feel free to have a look in that or skip through that. It displays all our activities and the strategy, and especially our reporting is the basis, I would say, for the perception of our stakeholders and also key for the ESG ratings. So with that, we come back to the capital market. I brought our first ESG rating from Sustainalytics as an example. We, of course, are very proud that the efforts that we put in from sustainability over the past almost now 3 years have paid off, and we achieved the #1 in the defense industry with Sustainalytics. But that doesn't mean that we can rest because the next rating is already coming up. We're already in the process actually for the next ratings. But still, it's nice to see that it pays off. It is a long rating report then, and it gives you really good indication also where you can improve in terms of sustainability until the next year. So as frustrating as these ratings can be, it's also a very good indicator to see where you can improve and where you should put more focus on, especially as they are industry specific. So you can see that Sustainalytics rates, it's very small here probably, almost 15,000 companies worldwide, and 91 in the aerospace and defense industry. So it gives you a really good indication where you stand on the market. Yeah, so I would say ESG is, well, like I said, an incredibly dynamic environment, especially the legislation is developing extremely fast with Brussels setting the pace here for Europe. But even beyond that, there's the NATO action plan, the new carbon neutrality plan, the SEC in the US. In addition, we've seen the expectations for our stakeholders, which are not diminishing either. So in the short time that was available today, I wanted to point out these expectations and the requirements we are confronted with and how we as a company in the defense industry deal with sustainability. But I want to go back to the initial question, like, are ESG and defense a contradiction? Well, we say no. So like any other company, I think we can and must manage our business in a sustainable way. Thereby, I think most of the topics can be applied to all companies, regardless the industry. For example, if you think of the working conditions, labor conditions, diversity, production related topics, conflict minerals, all these things, I think that is important or can be managed regardless of the industry. Of course, there are specific aspects to consider for us. For example, I think in the defense industry, topics such as anti-corruption, export control measures, or human rights are particularly essential. So I think ethical issues, meaning the G or the S in ESG, might be at least as or even more important than the E, the environmental matters. In addition, I said that the perception of our society and also among investors has developed positively as a result of the current situation. So ESG and defense are no longer considered as a contradiction per se. Defense is now partly even accepted among ESG investors. We have a very small percentage of ESG investors on board, but nevertheless, it remains a very sensitive topic. Of course, one can argue, and we heard that a lot, that without defense industry, there would be no, well, weapons or even conflicts in the first place. But I think we must also be honest and say that we do not live in a perfect world. And we have a state mandate to protect our society, our democracy, and yeah, against aggressors, which we could just witness here in Europe. So for us, it is clear that there is no sustainability without the security that we thankfully currently live in. But it remains to be seen how society and the capital markets, and especially also the legislators here in Europe, will position themselves. Yeah, so in doing so, I would like to conclude with a question. If we push the defense industry, what we've seen so far in this black corner, classify it as bad or untransparent, and financing is not possible anymore, then we force these companies to look to other financing options abroad, and there's dual capital flows that are generated. And yeah, who then governs this shadow world, and can that be considered then as sustainable? So that's a little food for thought. I wanted to give you a little impression of ESG in the defense industry, what we deal with and how we manage that. So I'll give back to Glenn, and thank you very much for the opportunity to be here.
Thank you, Sarah. Great job. Absolutely fascinating presentation. And thanks for people often just tend to focus on headlines, right? Or mindset or biases. And thank you for drilling down into all of the great stuff you guys are doing at the company. I mean, this was just remarkable. Your 7 clusters. When you think about health and safety, right? Mm-hmm. You could argue the health is an E. You could argue the safety certainly is an S. I mean, they go back and forth. You guys seem to be managing the G part as best you can. When you're dealing with governmental regulations and the like, as they continue to come out and evolve, it's hard to keep up. It's hard to keep up. You've got such a great foundation here, and again, proofs in the pudding. You're getting the ratings. From those for those that need the rating, or from an investment standpoint, I can only do business with certain people. You're hitting on all those cylinders. Fantastic.
Yeah, we'll keep pushing it. We'll keep working on it. We won't give up.
On your KPIs, you said you had about 120. So
Yes.
that's a mix of quantitative and qualitative, I assume, right?
That is mostly quantitative.
Mostly
Yeah,
quantitative. Okay.
but we do have a lot of qualitative as well. Yeah,
Okay.
it's a mix, but we try to have as many quantitative as well, although it's still like difficult, of course, in sustainability.
As you were working through that, I would imagine as you were trying to identify that, you probably included a whole bunch of people at the company, right? From a
Yes.
representation standpoint, and trying to, you get into divisions or departments and as to what might be an important metrics for them, right?
Yes, exactly. That was a very, very important part, I think, to get all the stakeholders on board. That's why we also have this cross-functional ESG team, which is very good, I think, still up to today, because we have one from every department and division as working for ESG partly, at least. And that's how we ensure that we have all these links throughout the company on board of our sustainability strategy.
Well, it's important this way. You kind of get the one hand knows what the other's doing, right? As you may have an idea in a particular department, and you don't necessarily have to rethink it because somebody else may already have something similar to that.
Yes.
And you could kind of join along that. Now, you said you have an executive committee that focuses on this, and that I assume that executive committee reports into the board, right?
Yes, correct.
Okay.
Yes.
So from an oversight standpoint, you're hitting on all cylinders again, which is
Yes.
great. What I found really great, and this comes from the world of capital markets, and I was at the New York Stock Exchange for 18 years. The fact that you did an ESG roadshow is fantastic. What a great. I haven't heard a lot of people doing that, but what a great idea.
Okay, yeah. We thought either in roadshow or now we consider it an ESG capital market day, but really focus one day specifically on the ESG, and was perceived very well. Yeah.
And you said your sustainability report, you build a lot of that from the integration standpoint back into the regular annual report.
Yes, correct. Yeah, so it is part of our annual report now. So yeah, we'll do that once a year, but it's basically a book almost.
Yeah, no,
I integrated.
I bet it's good. But what I mean, you guys are just doing a tremendous. I mean, you're pushing back on just that whole concept of, well, let's broad brush. Let's just exclude them, and you're giving it right back, which is just fantastic. I liked your internal one of your focuses as well, the Elevate program. That's very important. How many employees at the company?
In general, or
yeah.
So there's about almost 6,500, almost 7,000.
Okay, yeah, that's from all walks of life. So that's important certainly to have a program like that focuses on not only diversity but really belonging, right, and inclusion and wanting to make a difference and making sure that thanks for hiring me, but are you listening to me, right? Am I being heard? Do I feel like I belong?
Exactly.
Those are all important for employees.
And this field of trust that you can speak openly, and I think that was very important as well.
Absolutely. It's interesting again when you look at financial markets and home country practices, and then you try to compare that to say a U.S. Standpoint and methodology. I found it interesting that you said a lot of the from a sustainability standpoint on the rating side, oftentimes they're trying to apply a U.S. methodology to what's otherwise an international German-based European company.
Yeah, they don't even try; they just do it.
They just do it. Sure.
They do it. Yeah.
And we've had that. We've had that from time to time. When you look at regulations when they first published Sarbanes-Oxley, going on 20 years ago now, coming out of some of the U.S. Crisis and scandals back then. When they were trying to draft those languages, it took a while to get it right because sometimes people just do broad brush language. And when we were at the NYC, we heard a lot of feedback from a lot of the international companies saying, we don't have an equivalent word to that. Or if you say it that way, that means something completely different in our country. And trying to match that up sometimes is quite the challenge as it goes. On your side, from an investor standpoint, do you participate like in the typical investor outreach? I mean, you do obviously do the roadshow, but in the regular reporting of the earnings, is there usually a segment in the report where you continue to update the public on your initiatives and things?
Yeah, there usually is. So yeah, one of in our ESG team, there's also one colleague from the investor relations department. So we work closely together with that, and it's included in most of the communications that we do externally, and also in the regular quarterly reports.
That's fantastic. Well, listen, Sarah, thank you for joining us today. What a great conversation, great presentation. Congratulations on all your success and all your initiatives at Hensoldt. You guys are doing some wonderful work in this area, and thank you for being a big part of One Sustainability.
My pleasure. Thank you very much for the invite and let me be here and part of One Sustainability.
All right, thanks again. Sarah Sterzl from Hensoldt, Chief Sustainability Officer. Great to see you.
Thank you.
Take good care. Bye.
Take care. Bye.